My name is Cassandra, and at 32 years old, I have built a successful life as a graphic designer in Seattle. But 19 years ago, my parents abandoned me at a gas station 60 miles from home because I ruined their camping trip. They told me to woman up and find my own way back. Now, sitting on my coffee table is a wedding invitation from my brother with a note from them inside. My hands tremble as I stare at it, torn between the anger I have carried for years and the curiosity about what they could possibly have to say after all this time. Where are you watching from today? If you want to hear how I finally confronted the parents who left me sleeping behind a dumpster, hit subscribe now. I grew up in a middle-class suburban neighborhood in Portland, Oregon. Our house was a tidy two-story, with blue shutters on a street lined with similar homes and neatly trimmed lawns. From the outside, we looked like any other American family. But behind our front door was a household run on principles of toughness that bordered on cruelty. My father, Frank, had spent 8 years in the Army before I was born. He brought that military discipline home with him and never quite left it behind. Every morning, beds had to be made with hospital corners. Every toy had its place. Every emotion had to be controlled. My mother, Linda, came from a household even stricter than the one she created with my father. Her parents were Depression-era survivalists who believed comfort made people weak. She often told stories of walking 3 miles to school in snow and working from the age of 12 to help support her family. Back then, kids knew what responsibility meant, she would say whenever I complained about chores or homework. We did not have time for tears. My brother Tyler was 3 years older and seemed perfectly suited to our parents' expectations. He was naturally stoic, athletic, and self-sufficient. He could fix his own bicycle by age 7, never cried when he got hurt playing sports, and seemed to intuitively understand the unwritten rules of our household. Our parents beamed with pride when his teachers commented on his maturity and independence. I was different. Sensitive from the start, I loved art stories and felt things deeply. When a bird hit our living room window, I held a funeral in the backyard. When a character died in a book, I cried for hours. My emotional nature was treated like a defect that needed correction. The incident started early. When I was 8, I began crying in a department store because I was tired and hungry after hours of shopping. Instead of addressing my needs, my father knelt down to my level, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "You are embarrassing yourself. We are going to the car. You can either come with us now or find your own way home." My mother nodded in agreement. "Time to grow up, Cassandra." They walked away, and I panicked, running after them through the store. That day, they did not actually leave me, but the message was clear. My feelings were inconvenient, and expressing them could result in abandonment. When I was 9, I went through a phase where I was afraid of the dark. I begged for a nightlight, but my parents refused. "Fear is a choice," my father said. "You are choosing to be afraid instead of choosing to be brave." For weeks, I lay awake in terror until exhaustion finally claimed me each night. Eventually, I learned to hide under my covers with a flashlight until I fell asleep. When they discovered this, they took the flashlight away. "You will never learn if we keep rescuing you," my mother explained. Meanwhile, Tyler received a new bicycle for getting good grades, was allowed to have friends over whenever he wanted, and was never subjected to the same toughening up process I endured. The disparity was obvious but unaddressable in our household. The only person who seemed to notice or care was my Aunt Karen, my mother's younger sister. During occasional visits, she would bring me art supplies and books, things that nurtured my sensitive spirit instead of trying to crush it. She would slip me encouraging notes and whisper that it was okay to be exactly who I was. But these visits were too infrequent to counterbalance the daily message at home. There was something fundamentally wrong with me that needed to be fixed. By the time I turned 13, I had developed a quiet resistance. I learned to cry silently in the bathroom where no one would hear. I kept a journal hidden under a loose floorboard in my closet. I created an inner world where my feelings were valid even as the outer world told me otherwise. But this resistance only made my parents double down on their efforts to toughen me up. The tension in our household was building toward a breaking point that none of us could have predicted. The summer I turned 13, my father announced we would be taking a rare family vacation to Crater Lake National Park. I was genuinely excited despite our family dynamics. The prospect of seeing Oregon's famous blue water and spending time in nature appealed to my artistic sensibilities. I packed my sketchbook and colored pencils, dreaming of capturing the landscapes. The problems began as soon as we piled into our Chevy Suburban early on a Saturday morning in July. The car was already hot, the vinyl seats sticking to the backs of my legs. Tyler claimed the entire back row, sprawling out with his Walkman and comic books. I sat in the middle row, trying to make myself as small as possible. "Cassandra, stop fidgeting," my mother snapped when I tried to adjust my seatbelt. "We have a 4-hour drive ahead of us." "Sorry," I mumbled, already feeling like I had done something wrong. My father adjusted the rearview mirror to look at me. "This trip is costing a lot of money. I expect both of you to show some appreciation and have good attitudes." "Understood." "Yes, sir," Tyler and I replied in unison. The drive was mostly silent, except for my parents occasionally pointing out landmarks or discussing directions. I stared out the window, watching the landscape change from city to suburbs to the thick pine forests of southern Oregon. When I asked if we could stop at a roadside stand selling fresh berries, my father responded, "We are not wasting time. We have a schedule to keep." We arrived at the campground in the early afternoon and set up our tent efficiently, my father directing operations like a military exercise. When I struggled to hammer a tent stake into the hard ground, my mother took it from my hands. "Sometimes I wonder how you will ever manage on your own," she said, driving the stake in with 2 swift blows. That evening, as we sat around the campfire, I tried to engage my family in conversation. "Did you know Crater Lake was formed when a volcano collapsed?" "And it is almost 2,000 feet deep," I offered, having read the brochure front to back. "Everyone knows that genius," Tyler scoffed. My father nodded at him approvingly. "Your brother has been reading about this place for weeks. He already told us all about it on the drive while you were daydreaming." I had not heard any such conversation but stayed quiet, poking at the fire with a stick until my mother told me to stop before I ruined dinner. The real trouble began the next morning when my father announced a 6-mile hike around part of the crater rim. I had woken up feeling nauseated, possibly from the hot dogs we had eaten the night before, but I knew better than to complain. An hour into the hike, however, the combination of altitude, heat, and nausea became overwhelming. "I need to rest," I said, stopping on the trail. My father turned back, visibly annoyed. "We have barely started." "I do not feel well," I admitted. "My stomach hurts." My mother sighed loudly. "Always something with you, Cassandra." Tyler hiked 10 miles with a sprained ankle at scout camp last month. Tyler smirked at me from behind our parents. "I am really not feeling good," I insisted, a cold sweat breaking out across my forehead. "Fine," my father said sharply. "You sit here and feel sorry for yourself. We will continue the hike and pick you up on the way back." My mother did not even look at me as they walked away. "Make sure you drink water," she called over her shoulder. "It is probably just dehydration from all that complaining." I sat on a rock for nearly 3 hours, occasionally sipping from my water bottle, feeling simultaneously sick to my stomach and sick with the knowledge that I had once again failed to meet their expectations. When they finally returned, no one asked how I was feeling. The rest of the day passed in tense silence. That evening at the campfire, my father announced, "We will be cutting our trip short. Since someone is not feeling well enough to participate in the activities we planned, there is no point in staying the full week." The accusation hung heavy in the air. My mother nodded in agreement. Tyler kicked a rock in frustration, glaring at me. "Why does she always ruin everything?" he muttered loud enough for me to hear. I went to bed that night, curled up in my sleeping bag, as far from my family as the confines of our tent would allow, wishing I could disappear. The next morning we packed up camp in silence. No one spoke as we loaded the car and pulled away from Crater Lake. I watched the blue water fade from view, knowing I had somehow failed yet another test I did not know I was taking. About 2 hours into our drive home, my father pulled into a gas station in a small town I did not recognize. The station was little more than 2 pumps and a small convenience store on a stretch of highway surrounded by pine trees. "I need to use the bathroom," I said as we all got out of the car. "Make it quick," my father replied. When I came out of the bathroom, my parents and brother were standing by the car. My father had just finished pumping gas, and my mother was holding a map. "Cassandra," my father said, his voice eerily calm, "you are 13 years old now, old enough to take responsibility for your actions and their consequences." I stood frozen, not understanding what was happening. "Yesterday you chose to ruin our family vacation," he continued. "Today you can choose to find your own way home." What I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My mother folded the map and looked at me with cold eyes. "It is time you learned that your behavior affects others. Maybe this will finally teach you to woman up." "You cannot be serious," I said, looking from one parent to the other, waiting for this to reveal itself as some kind of twisted joke. Tyler was already in the back seat, pointedly looking away from me. "We are an hour from home," my father said, though I knew this was a lie. We had been driving for only 2 hours from Crater Lake, and the trip was 4 hours total. "You have got your allowance. There is a phone in the store. Figure it out." With that, he got into the driver's seat. My mother walked around to the passenger side, pausing only to say, "This is for your own good, Cassandra. Sometimes lessons have to be hard to stick." I stood in shocked disbelief as they started the car. "You cannot leave me here," I cried, running toward the car. My father rolled down his window partway. "Watch us," he said, and then they drove away, leaving me standing alone in a cloud of dust and exhaust. I watched until their car disappeared around a bend in the highway, certain they would turn around and come back. They did not. The first hour after my family drove away, I sat on the curb outside the gas station, convincing myself they would return. This was just another lesson, an extreme version of walking away from me in the department store. They wanted to scare me to prove some point about independence and consequences. After the second hour, I began to accept that they might not be coming back anytime soon. I went into the convenience store and approached the bored-looking attendant, a young man with acne and a name tag that read Doug. "Excuse me," I said, my voice shaking. "My parents left me here. Can I use your phone?" Doug looked up from his magazine with suspicion. "Phone is for paying customers only." I dug into my pocket and pulled out my money, $7.25, my entire allowance for the week. "Can I buy something small and then use it?" He shrugged. "Whatever." I purchased a bottle of water for $1.50, leaving me with $5.75. Doug pointed to a payphone mounted on the wall near the bathroom. I called my home number first, letting it ring until our answering machine picked up. I left a message, my voice breaking. "It is Cassandra. I am still at the gas station. Please come get me." Then I hung up and tried again, thinking maybe they were screening calls. No answer. Next, I tried my Aunt Karen, but got her answering machine as well. "Aunt Karen, it is Cassandra. Mom and Dad left me at a gas station on the way back from Crater Lake. I do not know exactly where I am. Please call me back at." I realized I did not know the number of the payphone. I had to hang up and examine the phone to find it, then call back and leave the number. I tried a few other relatives, but no one answered. It was Sunday, and people were probably out enjoying their day, unaware that mine had turned into a nightmare. I went back to Doug. "Do you know where I am exactly? Like the name of this town?" "Pine Creek," he answered without looking up. "About 60 miles south of Portland." 60 miles. I had been right. My father had lied about how far we were from home. "Is there a bus station nearby?" I asked, though I already knew $5 would not get me very far. Doug snorted. "Bus comes through on Tuesdays and Fridays. Today is Sunday." I returned to the curb outside and watched the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. A few cars stopped for gas, but the occupants barely glanced at me. I considered asking someone for help, but remembered all the warnings my parents had drilled into me about strangers. The irony was not lost on me that the people who had warned me about the dangers of the world had just thrown me to those very dangers. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped rapidly. I was wearing only shorts, a t-shirt, and sneakers. I had no jacket, no blanket, nothing to protect me from the cold night air. The gas station closed at 9 o'clock. Doug gave me a look of mild concern as he locked up. "You got somewhere to go, kid?" he asked. "My ride is coming," I lied, not wanting to appear as desperate and abandoned as I felt. He seemed relieved by my answer. "All right then, good luck." And then he was gone too, driving away in a beat-up Honda. The lights inside the store went out, leaving only the harsh fluorescent glow of the area around the gas pumps. I knew those would likely be turned off soon as well. Panic began to set in as I realized I would be spending the night outside alone in the dark. I walked around the building, looking for somewhere safe to wait out the night. Behind the gas station was a dumpster, and behind that a small alcove formed by the wall of the building and a stack of empty pallets. It smelled bad but was out of sight from the road and offered some protection from the wind that was picking up. I wedged myself into the space, hugging my knees to my chest, and tried to make myself as small as possible. The ground was hard and littered with cigarette butts and other trash. Something scurried in the darkness nearby, a mouse or rat investigating the new inhabitant of its territory. Hunger gnawed at my stomach. I had not eaten since a granola bar at breakfast, but I knew I needed to save my remaining money. I sipped sparingly from my water bottle, aware that when it was gone, I had no way to get more until the store reopened in the morning. As the night deepened, strange noises emerged from the surrounding woods. An owl hooted branches, creaked distant cars occasionally passed on the highway. Each sound sent a new wave of fear through me. I had never been afraid of the dark like this before, not even during my phase with the nightlight. This was different, more primal. This was the fear of being utterly alone and unprotected in a world that suddenly seemed vast and threatening. I thought about my family driving home without me. Were they worried? Did they regret leaving me? Or were they satisfied with their lesson, believing I was finally learning to woman up? I imagined Tyler in his room, perhaps feeling guilty, but too loyal to our parents to speak up. I pictured my mother setting the dinner table with one less place, setting my father sitting in his recliner, watching the evening news as if nothing had happened. Around midnight, the temperature dropped further. I could see my breath in the air. My body shook with cold and fear. Insects buzzed around me, drawn to the only warm body in the vicinity. Something crawled across my foot, and I had to stuff my fist in my mouth to keep from screaming. I cycled through emotions as the night wore on. First came disbelief, a stunned numbness that this could really be happening. Then fear took over, a relentless parade of worst-case scenarios. What if no one came for me? What if something attacked me in the night? What if I froze to death behind this gas station dumpster and no one ever knew what happened to me? Fear gave way to anger around 2 a.m, a burning rage that made my teeth clench and my fists ball up. How dare they do this to me? What kind of parents abandon their child for being sick on a hike? The injustice of it all made me want to scream, but I stayed silent, afraid of attracting attention from whatever or whoever might be lurking in the darkness. Anger eventually surrendered to a cool, clear resolve. If I survived this night, I would never trust my parents again. The relationship was broken beyond repair. I began to plan what I would do when morning came, how I would find help, who I could rely on if not the people who were supposed to protect me. In the coldest, darkest hour before dawn, a strange calm settled over me. I was still afraid, still cold, still hungry, but something had crystallized inside me. I knew with absolute certainty that this night was a dividing line in my life. There would forever be before the gas station and after the gas station. The person I had been yesterday was gone, replaced by someone harder, someone who understood exactly how disposable she was to the people who should have loved her most. As the first pale light of dawn filtered through the trees, I uncurled my stiff, aching body from its protective ball. I had not slept. Not really, just drifted in and out of a vigilant daze. My clothes were damp with dew, my hair tangled with bits of debris from my makeshift shelter. I crawled out from behind the dumpster, every muscle protesting, and made my way to the front of the gas station to wait for it to open. Morning light revealed the gas station in all its dilapidated glory. What had seemed merely run down the night before now looked positively decrepit. The white paint was peeling the sign, missing several letters, and the concrete around the pumps was stained with decades of oil drips. I sat on the curb, dirty, hungry, and utterly exhausted, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. Around 7:30, a rusty pickup truck pulled into the lot. A heavy-set man in overalls got out, unlocked the store, and flipped the sign from closed to open. He did a double take when he saw me. "You been here all night, girl?" he asked, his brow furrowed. I nodded, too tired to lie. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "Come on in. Let us get you cleaned up." This man, whose name I would learn was Bill, was not Doug from the night before, but the actual owner of the gas station. He led me into the small store and straight to a back room that served as an office and break room. "Martha," he called out, "come here a minute." A woman appeared from behind a shelf she had been restocking. She took one look at me and her hand flew to her mouth. "Good Lord, what happened to you?" she asked. I told them my story, expecting disbelief like I had received from Doug. Instead, Martha's face grew increasingly red with anger. "What kind of monsters leave their child at a gas station?" she demanded. "Bill, call the sheriff." "No, please," I said quickly. "Just let me call my aunt. She will come get me." Bill nodded and showed me to the phone behind the counter. This time, when I called Aunt Karen, she answered on the second ring. "Hello." "Aunt Karen," I said, my voice breaking. "It is Cassandra." "Cassandra, honey, what is wrong? Why are you calling so early?" "Mom and Dad left me at a gas station yesterday. They drove away and left me here." There was a moment of silence then. "What do you mean they left you? Where are you exactly?" "A gas station in Pine Creek. They said I ruined the camping trip because I got sick, and they left me here to teach me a lesson." The words tumbled out between sobs that I could no longer control. "They did what?" Aunt Karen's voice rose to a shout. "Put the owner on the phone, Cassandra." I handed the phone to Bill, who spoke briefly with my aunt, confirming my location and assuring her I was safe for the moment. When he hung up, he turned to me with kind eyes. "Your aunt is on her way. Said she will be here in about an hour. Martha is going to get you something to eat and help you clean up a bit." Martha led me to a small bathroom where she gave me a damp paper towel to wipe my face and a brush for my tangled hair. When I emerged, she had prepared a breakfast sandwich and orange juice, refusing my attempt to pay with my remaining money. "You keep that, honey. You might need it." True to her word, Aunt Karen arrived in just under an hour, tires screeching as she pulled into the parking lot. She burst from her car and enveloped me in a fierce hug before I could even stand up from the plastic chair where I had been waiting. "Oh my God, Cassandra, are you okay? Did anyone hurt you? I cannot believe this is happening." She held me at arm's length, examining me for injuries, her eyes wild with concern. "I am okay," I assured her, though we both knew it was a lie. Aunt Karen turned to Bill and Martha. "Thank you for looking after her. I do not know how to repay you." "No need," Bill said gruffly. "Just make sure whoever did this faces consequences." The drive back to Portland was quiet at first. I stared out the window, watching the same scenery I had seen yesterday from my family's car, now transformed into something unrecognizable by what had happened. "I called your house," Aunt Karen finally said, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. No answer. "We will try again when we get to my place." Her apartment was a small 2-bedroom in a complex on the east side of Portland. It was cluttered but cozy, filled with books and plants and colorful throw pillows. The exact opposite of my parents' austere, organized home. "You can stay in the spare room as long as you need to," she said, showing me to a room that doubled as her office. "Let us try your parents again." This time, my mother answered on the 4th ring. "Hello." Aunt Karen put the call on speakerphone. "Linda, it is Karen. I have Cassandra with me." A pause. "Oh, she called you." The casual tone, the complete lack of concern made my stomach clench. "Yes, Linda, she called me." after spending the night behind a dumpster because her parents abandoned her at a gas station. What the hell were you thinking? Karen, you do not understand. Cassandra has been increasingly difficult. She needs to learn about consequences. Consequences? She is 13 years old. You left your child 60 miles from home with no shelter, no food, no way to get home. Do you have any idea what could have happened to her? We were teaching her self-reliance, my mother replied stiffly. Frank and I discussed it thoroughly. We knew she would figure it out. Figure what out, Linda? How to survive being abandoned by the people who are supposed to protect her. How to sleep outside in 40-degree weather. How to avoid being kidnapped or worse. You are overreacting. Cassandra has always been too sensitive. This is exactly the problem we are trying to address. I sat listening to my mother justify leaving me behind, and something inside me went cold and still. This was not a parent who had made a mistake in the heat of anger. This was a calculated decision. They had discussed it thoroughly. They had planned to abandon me. I want to talk to her, I said suddenly. Aunt Karen looked at me with concern but handed me the phone. Mom, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Are you and Dad coming to get me? Cassandra, my mother replied, her tone suddenly gentle in a way that sent chills down my spine. This was a lesson you needed to learn. When you are ready to apologize for ruining our trip and demonstrate that you understand the importance of thinking about others, we can discuss you coming home. In that moment, I knew I would never go back. I slept behind a dumpster last night, I said quietly. I was cold and scared and alone. Is that what you and Dad wanted? Sometimes the most important lessons are the hardest ones, she replied. When you are ready to come home and follow our rules, you know our number. I handed the phone back to Aunt Karen, who proceeded to have the most explosive argument I had ever heard her engage in with my sister. Words like neglect, abuse, and authorities were thrown around. By the end, it was clear that I would be staying with Aunt Karen indefinitely, and she would be seeking emergency temporary custody. The following days were a blur of activity. Aunt Karen took me to a doctor who documented my physical condition, including the insect bites, scratches, and mild hypothermia I had suffered. We met with a social worker who took detailed statements about what had happened and about my life at home leading up to the incident. Aunt Karen hired a lawyer, dipping into her savings to pay the retainer. 3 days after my rescue, we went to my parents' house to collect my belongings. Aunt Karen insisted that a police officer accompany us, which turned out to be a wise precaution. My parents were coldly civil, watching with stony faces as I packed clothes, books, and a few treasured possessions into garbage bags. My brother Tyler hovered in the hallway, looking conflicted. When our parents stepped away to speak with the officer, he slipped into my room. Cass, he whispered. I did not know they were really going to leave you there. I thought they were just trying to scare you. I looked at him, this brother who had always been their favorite, who had sat silent in the car as they drove away from me. But you did not say anything. You just let them do it. He stared at his feet. I know. I am sorry. It was the first and only apology I would get from anyone in my family. As we prepared to leave, my father stepped in front of me. This rebellion will not accomplish anything, Cassandra. When you are ready to be part of this family again, you know what we expect. I expect parents who do not abandon their children, I replied, surprising myself with my boldness. I guess we are both disappointed. I walked out of that house and did not look back. Living with Aunt Karen was like stepping into a different universe. In her small apartment, feelings were not weaknesses to be suppressed, but experiences to be acknowledged. When I woke up screaming from nightmares about being alone in the dark, she did not tell me to toughen up. She sat with me, offered me tea, and listened as I tried to articulate the terror that now lived inside me. The legal battle for custody was both quicker and more difficult than we expected. My parents initially fought Aunt Karen's petition, claiming I was a troubled child who had manipulated the situation. But the evidence was overwhelming. The gas station owner and his wife provided statements. The doctor's report detailed the physical effects of my night outside. My own testimony about years of emotional neglect eventually convinced the judge. When my parents realized they were losing, their strategy shifted. Suddenly, they claimed they wanted me back, that they had made a terrible mistake, that they had learned their lesson, but their actions betrayed their words. During supervised visitations, my father lectured me about loyalty and respect. My mother cried about how I was tearing the family apart. Neither ever simply said they were sorry for what they had done. The judge granted Aunt Karen temporary custody for 6 months, with mandatory family therapy if my parents wanted to work toward reunification. They attended exactly 2 sessions before declaring the therapist biased and refusing to return. Changing schools mid-year was another challenge. I went from the familiar hallways of Westlake Middle School to Riverside Middle, where I knew no one, and had to explain my situation to curious new classmates. "I live with my aunt" now became my standard response, deflecting further questions. Some teachers were understanding, offering extra help as I adjusted to different textbooks and teaching styles. Others viewed me with suspicion, perhaps influenced by the whispered rumors that inevitably spread. That girl was abandoned by her parents. There must be something wrong with her. Aunt Karen enrolled me in therapy with Dr. Melissa Collins, a child psychologist specializing in trauma. Twice a week, I sat in her office, filled with plants and soft lighting, trying to make sense of what had happened and who I was now. "What your parents did was about them, not you, Doctor," Collins told me repeatedly. "Nothing you could have done would justify their actions." Intellectually, I understood this. Emotionally, it was harder to accept. Some part of me still believed that if I had just been tougher, less sensitive, more like Tyler, my parents would have loved me enough to keep me safe. Portland was small enough that occasionally I would spot my parents or brother around town. The first time it happened at a grocery store 6 months after I left home. I froze in the cereal aisle as my mother walked past. She saw me, paused, then continued shopping as if I were a stranger. The casual dismissal hurt more than a confrontation would have. Tyler and I developed an awkward, limited relationship. He would call, sometimes always, when our parents were out to check on me. He came to see me once at Aunt Karen's apartment, bringing my favorite candy and sitting stiffly on the edge of the couch. "They never talk about you," he admitted during that visit. "It is like you never existed." I nodded, unsurprised. "Are they still the same with you?" "Yeah," he said. "But different too. Stricter, I think. Like they are afraid I will turn out like you if they ease up." By the time I entered high school, the temporary custody arrangement had become permanent. My parents stopped fighting it, perhaps realizing it was easier for everyone this way. They could maintain their image of perfect parenting without having to deal with their imperfect child. I could heal without the constant pressure to be someone I was not. Aunt Karen became my rock, my safe harbor. She came to every school play, celebrated every achievement, held me through every setback. She worked extra shifts at the hospital where she was a nurse to provide for me, never once making me feel like a burden. "You are a gift," she would tell me. "Not a responsibility, not an obligation. A gift." Academically, I threw myself into my studies, finding that focus and achievement provided a sense of control I desperately needed. Art remained my passion, but I discovered a talent for writing as well. My English teachers encouraged me to submit essays to contests, and when I won a statewide competition in my junior year, Aunt Karen framed the certificate and hung it on our refrigerator. My parents did not acknowledge the achievement, though I knew Tyler must have told them. Their silence was another form of abandonment, but by then I had stopped waiting for their approval. Dating proved complicated as I got older. Trust did not come easily to me, and physical intimacy triggered panic attacks I could not always explain to confused boyfriends. Doctor. Collins helped me navigate these waters, teaching me how to communicate my boundaries and recognize when fear was protecting me versus when it was limiting me. "The night at the gas station taught you that people who are supposed to love you can hurt you," she explained. "That is a hard lesson to unlearn, but not an impossible one." College applications went out in my senior year, and I set my sights far from Portland. When the acceptance letter from the Rhode Island School of Design arrived, Aunt Karen and I danced around the kitchen in celebration. "I always knew you were destined for great things," she said, wiping proud tears from her eyes. Moving across the country was terrifying but necessary. I needed to prove to myself that I could survive, even thrive on my own terms. The irony was not lost on me that in trying to force me to woman up, my parents had set in motion the very independence they claimed to value, just not in the way they intended. College was transformative. Surrounded by other creative souls, I found my tribe. People who understood sensitivity as a strength, not a weakness. I studied graphic design, discovering a passion for visual storytelling that would eventually become my career. I returned to Portland only for brief visits during those 4 years. Each time the city felt less like home and more like a museum of painful memories. Tyler graduated from Oregon State and took a job with an accounting firm in Seattle. Our relationship remained distant but cordial, occasional phone calls and holiday cards, maintaining the barest connection. After graduation, I moved to Seattle myself, drawn by its vibrant design scene and the presence of my brother, the one tenuous link to my past I was not quite ready to sever. We established a cautious friendship, meeting for coffee every few months, carefully avoiding the subject of our parents. In my late 20s, I began building a reputation as a graphic designer, specializing in branding for nonprofits. My work won awards, my client list grew, and I bought a small but stylish condo overlooking Puget Sound. On paper, my life was a success story. In reality, I still jumped at unexpected noises and slept with a light on. I still had trust issues that had torpedoed more than one promising relationship. I still carried the weight of that night behind the dumpster. But I also had a chosen family now. Friends who had proven their loyalty over years. Aunt Karen, who called every Sunday without fail. A therapist who had helped me understand that my sensitivity was my superpower, not my weakness. A career that allowed me to use that sensitivity to create work that moved people. Through it all, I maintained one absolute boundary: no contact with my parents. They had tried reaching out a few times over the years, usually around holidays or my birthday, but I never responded. The wall between us was one of my own building, and I had no interest in creating a door. Until the day 19 years after they abandoned me, when the wedding invitation arrived. The package arrived on a Tuesday in May, a plain brown envelope with my brother's neat handwriting on the address label. I was not expecting anything from Tyler, our last communication having been a brief text exchange at Christmas, so I opened it with mild curiosity. Inside was a cream-colored envelope with elaborate calligraphy, "Miss Cassandra Mitchell." Sliding my finger under the flap, I pulled out a thick cardstock invitation announcing the wedding of Tyler Mitchell to Jessica Chen, to be held in Portland in 6 weeks' time. My first reaction was happiness for my brother. In our infrequent conversations, he had mentioned Jessica several times, a kindergarten teacher he had met through volunteer work. She sounded kind and grounded, exactly what Tyler needed. But as I set the invitation on my coffee table, something else fell from the envelope. A smaller, plain white envelope, with simply Cassandra written on it in handwriting. I recognized immediately. My mother's precise teacher-like script. My hands began to shake as I stared at it. 19 years since I had seen those neat, controlled letters. 19 years since I had any direct communication with either of my parents. Why now? What could they possibly have to say that I would want to hear? I left the note sitting untouched on my coffee table for 3 days, going about my work, my routines, while it seemed to pulse with malevolent energy from its innocuous white paper. On the 4th day, unable to stand the suspense any longer, I finally opened it. "Cassandra," it began without preamble. "Tyler's wedding has made us reflect on family and the passage of time. We have made mistakes. We would like the opportunity to speak with you before the ceremony if you are willing. We understand if you are not. Regardless, we hope you will be there for your brother's special day. He misses you. Linda and Frank Mitchell." No dear. No love. No explicit apology for abandoning me at a gas station and leaving me to sleep behind a dumpster. Just an acknowledgement of unspecified mistakes and a request to talk. The coldness of it, the careful distancing language, sent me spiraling into a panic attack so severe I had to call my friend Jessie to come over. Jessie found me hyperventilating on my bathroom floor, the note crumpled in my fist. She sat with me, talking me through breathing exercises until the room stopped spinning and my lungs remembered how to work properly. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" she asked when I was calmer. I handed her the crumpled note and watched her face change as she read it. "Those absolute bastards," she said finally. "This is not even an apology." "I know," I whispered, "but Tyler wants me at his wedding." Jessie helped me to the couch and made us both tea, giving me space to process. "What do you want to do?" she asked eventually. "I do not know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to throw this in the trash and pretend I never saw it. Another part wants closure," Jessie finished for me. I nodded. "Is that pathetic after everything they did?" "No, it is human. But closure does not have to mean reconciliation, Cass. It could just mean saying your piece and walking away for good." That night, I called Dr. Lisa Warner, the therapist who had taken over my care when I moved to Seattle. She fit me in for an emergency session the next morning. "This is a significant trigger," she acknowledged as I showed her the note. "How are you feeling about it?" "Angry, scared, confused, like I am 13 again and powerless." "But you are not 13 anymore," she reminded me. "You are 32, successful, independent. You have all the power in this situation. You can choose to engage or not engage. You can set the terms." Over the next week, I researched family estrangement and reconciliation. I read accounts from other adults who had confronted abusive parents years later. Some found healing in the confrontation, others regretted opening old wounds. There was no one-size-fits-all answer. I made a pros and cons list, as I did with all major decisions. Pros of attending the wedding and meeting my parents, supporting Tyler. Potential closure. Showing them I survived and thrived despite them. Facing my fears. Cons: reopening trauma. Panic attacks. Them minimizing what they did. Them trying to control the narrative. Emotional exhaustion. I called Aunt Karen, now 70 and retired to Arizona, but still my greatest support. "Whatever you decide, I will back you 100%, she said. "But if you do go, I am coming with you. There is no way I am letting you face them alone." Her unwavering support tipped the scales. 2 weeks after receiving the invitation, I called Tyler. "I got your invitation," I said when he answered. And the hope in his voice was palpable. "I will be there. But I need you to understand something. I am not coming for them. I am coming for you." "Thank you," he said, the relief evident. "It would not be the same without you there." There was a note from them in the envelope. A pause. "I know. They asked if they could include it. They want to meet before the wedding." Another pause, longer this time. "They have changed, Cass. At least I think they have. Getting older, seeing friends their age become grandparents. It has made them reflect, I think." I was not convinced, but I also knew Tyler had his own complicated relationship with our parents. He had been the favored child, but also a witness to my mistreatment. His loyalty had always been divided. "I will think about meeting them," I said finally. "But I am not promising anything." After consulting further with Dr. Warner, I made my decision. I would meet my parents, but only under specific conditions in a public place with Aunt Karen present, and for a limited time. I would hear what they had to say what I needed to say, and then decide about further contact. I booked flights for myself and Aunt Karen. I reserved hotel rooms, not willing to stay with Tyler and risk running into our parents unexpectedly. I wrote out what I wanted to say, practicing with Dr. Warner until I could deliver the words without breaking down. As the date approached, my anxiety increased. I had nightmares about being abandoned again, about being 13 and alone in the dark. I threw myself into work during the day, trying to exhaust myself enough to sleep at night. I doubled my therapy sessions and practiced meditation techniques to manage the panic attacks that came with increasing frequency. A week before the wedding, I received a text from Tyler. "They're looking forward to seeing you. Thank you for giving them this chance." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I haven't decided anything beyond hearing what they have to say. The night before our flight to Portland, I stood at my bedroom window looking out at the Seattle skyline. 19 years of building a life of healing, of becoming someone my 13-year-old self could be proud of. Was I really going to risk all that progress for people who had thrown me away like garbage? But then I thought of that scared girl behind the dumpster, and I knew she deserved to be heard. If nothing else, I would speak for her. The flight to Portland was turbulent, matching my internal state. Aunt Karen held my hand during takeoff and landing, her arthritis-gnarled fingers still strong and reassuring. We checked into our hotel downtown, a sleek high-rise far removed from the suburban neighborhood where I had grown up. "How are you holding up?" Aunt Karen asked as we unpacked. Terrified, I admitted, but resolved. We had arranged to meet Tyler for coffee that afternoon before the rehearsal dinner that evening, which I had chosen not to attend. He was waiting for us at a cafe near Powell's Books, a neutral location that held no memories for me. The man who stood to greet us bore little resemblance to the brother I remembered. At 35, Tyler had filled out his formerly lanky frame. Now, solid. His dark hair was already receding slightly, and he wore wire-rimmed glasses that gave him a scholarly look. But his nervous smile was familiar. "Aunt Karen," he said, embracing her warmly before turning to me with more hesitation. "Cass, you look amazing." I accepted his awkward hug, noting the expensive watch on his wrist, the designer shoes. Tyler had done well for himself, apparently. "Congratulations on your engagement," I said as we sat down. "Tell me about Jessica." He relaxed, visibly happy to talk about his fiancée. "She is wonderful. Patient, kind, funny. You will love her." I nodded, though I was not sure I would have the emotional bandwidth to form any new connections on this trip. Eventually, the conversation turned to the reason for my visit. "Mom and Dad are nervous about tomorrow," Tyler said, fidgeting with his coffee cup. "They are not sure what to expect." "That makes two of us," I replied. "What exactly do they want from this meeting, Tyler? Because their note was not exactly forthcoming." He sighed. "They want to apologize, I think. In their own way." "Their own way," I repeated flatly. Like abandoning me was just a difference in parenting styles. "Cass," he began, but Aunt Karen cut him off. "Tyler, you know what they did was inexcusable. Not strict parenting. Not a tough lesson. Child abandonment. Abuse." He had the grace to look ashamed. "I know. And I think deep down they know too. They are just not good at admitting when they are wrong." "Understatement of the century," I muttered. We parted with plans to meet at the restaurant the next morning. I spent a restless night waking from nightmares where I was still 13, still alone, still waiting for someone to come back for me. The restaurant Tyler had chosen was upscale but not pretentious, with large windows overlooking the Willamette River. Aunt Karen and I arrived 15 minutes early at my insistence. I needed to be there first to have the psychological advantage of watching them walk in rather than having them watch me. "Remember," Aunt Karen said as we were seated, "you are in control. We can leave at any time." I nodded, my throat too tight for words. My hands trembled slightly as I sipped water, and I kept my eyes fixed on the entrance. At exactly 11 o'clock, they walked in. 19 years had transformed them from the towering authority figures of my childhood into what they truly were, just ordinary people in their 60s. My father's military posture had softened with age, his shoulders slightly stooped, his once dark hair now silver. My mother looked smaller than I remembered, her face lined, her hands spotted with age marks. They scanned the restaurant with identical expressions of apprehension, until Tyler, who had arrived moments before them, pointed in our direction. I watched their faces as they registered my presence. My mother's hand went to her throat in a gesture I remembered from childhood. My father's jaw tightened, then deliberately relaxed. They approached our table with measured steps. "Cassandra," my mother said, her voice catching slightly. You look well." Karen, my father, acknowledged my aunt with a curt nod which she did not return. An awkward silence fell as they took their seats. Tyler looked between us all with the desperate expression of someone who had made a terrible mistake. "Thank you for agreeing to meet us," my father finally said, his voice gruffer than I remembered. I had rehearsed this moment for weeks, but now that it was here, all my carefully prepared statements evaporated. "Why now?" I asked simply. "After 19 years, why reach out now?" My parents exchanged glances. "Tyler's wedding," my mother began. "It made us realize. That time is passing," my father finished for her. "That family is important." Family, I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. "You abandoned me at a gas station when I was 13 years old. You left me to sleep behind a dumpster. You never came back for me. You never even called to see if I was alive or dead. And now you want to talk about family." My mother flinched. "We thought you would call someone. Find a way home." I was 13. My voice rose despite my determination to stay calm. "I had $7.25 in my pocket. It was 60 miles to Portland. What exactly did you expect me to do?" "We made a mistake," my father said, the admission seeming to physically pain him. "We took the lesson too far." "A lesson," I echoed. "Is that what you call child abandonment these days?" "Cassandra," my mother reached across the table, but I pulled my hands back. "We were trying to teach you independence, self-reliance. You never meant for me to spend the night outdoors. To be terrified, hungry, cold, to think my own parents did not care if I lived or died. What exactly did you mean to happen?" "We thought you would call a friend for a ride," my father said. "Or flag down a police officer. Show some initiative." The absurdity of his statement struck me like a physical blow. "Initiative," I repeated. "I was a child. Your child. It was your job to protect me, not to abandon me as some twisted test." "We know that now," my mother said softly. "We have had a lot of time to think about our choices." 19 years, I agreed. 19 years in which you made no attempt to apologize, to make amends, to even acknowledge what you did. "We tried to reach out," my father protested. "You cut us off." For my own protection, I was shouting now, not caring who heard. "You were dangerous to me. You hurt me deliberately, calculatedly, and then you justified it. Why would I let you back into my life?" Tyler put a hand on my arm. "Cass, please. They are trying." I shook him off. "No, Tyler. Trying would have been getting therapy to understand why they thought abandoning their child was acceptable. Trying would have been sending a real apology, not a vague note about mistakes slipped into a wedding invitation. Trying would have been respecting my boundaries for 19 years instead of using your wedding to force a confrontation." My father's face hardened into the familiar mask of disapproval I remembered from childhood. "You always were. Too emotional, Cassandra. This is exactly the weakness we were trying to correct." "Frank," my mother warned, but it was too late. "There it is," I said, a cold calm replacing my anger. "There is the real reason you abandoned me. Not to teach me a lesson. Not to build character. Because you could not stand that I was sensitive. That I had feelings. That I was not a robot like you wanted." "That is not fair," my mother protested. "Fair," Aunt Karen interjected, speaking for the first time. "You want to talk about fair, Linda? Was it fair to leave your daughter alone at a gas station? Was it fair to drive away and not look back? Was it fair to tell her it was for her own good when really it was because you and Frank could not handle a child who did not conform to your rigid expectations?" My mother's face crumpled. For the first time, I saw what might have been genuine remorse in her eyes. "No," she whispered. "It was not fair. We were wrong, my father said, the admission clearly costing him. We should never have left you there. No, you should not have, I agreed. But you did. And here we are 19 years later, and I have built a life without you. A good life. I am successful, independent, strong. Everything you claimed to want for me I achieved despite you, not because of you. And we are proud of you, my mother said, reaching for my hand again. This time I let her touch me briefly before pulling away. You do not get to be proud of me, I said quietly. You did not earn that right. The people who can be proud of me are the ones who supported me, who helped me heal from what you did. Aunt Karen, my therapists, my friends, my chosen family. My father looked away, jaw working. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Tyler stared miserably into his coffee cup. I came here today for closure, I continued, to say what I needed to say to your faces, to let you know that I survived what you did to me, that I am whole and healed despite the best efforts of the people who should have protected me. What can we do, my mother asked quietly, to make amends? I considered the question seriously. I do not know if you can. Some broken things cannot be fixed. But if you really want to try, you could start by acknowledging exactly what you did without justifications or excuses. You could get therapy to understand why you thought it was acceptable to abandon your child. You could respect whatever boundaries I set going forward without question or complaint. My father nodded stiffly. We can do that. I will believe it when I see it, I replied. For now, I will be at Tyler's wedding tomorrow. I will be civil. I will smile for photographs. But do not mistake that for forgiveness or reconciliation. That would take time and evidence of real change on your part. We understand, my mother said, though I was not sure she did. We parted soon after the meeting, having reached its natural conclusion. As they walked away, my father's hand on my mother's elbow, guiding her through the tables, I felt a curious lightness. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but a burden lifted nonetheless. I had faced them as an adult on my terms and said my piece. The wedding the next day was a blur of polite interactions and careful distance. Jessica was indeed lovely, warm, and genuine, in a way that made me hope she would be good for Tyler. I gave a brief toast that focused entirely on my brother and his bride, acknowledging our childhood only in the vaguest terms. My parents stayed on their side of the room, respecting the boundaries I had set. As Aunt Karen and I prepared to leave the reception, my mother approached alone. Cassandra, she said hesitantly, thank you for coming. It meant everything to Tyler. I nodded. I came for him, not for you. I know. She twisted her hands together, a nervous gesture I had never seen from her before. I wanted to say, what happened that night? At the gas station. I have imagined it 1,000 times. What it must have been like for you, how scared you must have been. I am so sorry, truly sorry. It was the most direct apology she had ever offered, and something in me responded to the sincerity in her voice. Thank you for saying that, I said finally. Would it be all right if I called you sometimes? She asked. Just to talk. I considered the request. You can email me, I offered. Let us start there and see how it goes. Her face brightened slightly. I would like that very much. I did not hug her goodbye, but I did shake her hand, a small gesture of civility that seemed to mean a great deal to her. On the flight back to Seattle, Aunt Karen asked, Are you okay? I think I am, I replied, surprised to find it was true. I said what I needed to say. I stood up for that 13-year-old girl behind the dumpster. Whatever happens next, I did that. I am so proud of you, she said, squeezing my hand. You are the strongest person I know. Back in Seattle, I returned to my life, my work, my routines, but something had shifted inside me. The past would always be part of me, but it no longer defined me. I was not just the girl who had been abandoned. I was the woman who had survived, thrived, and finally confronted her abandoners. 2 weeks after the wedding, an email arrived from my mother. It was awkward, formal, full of weather reports and impersonal news. But it was something. I waited 3 days before sending a brief, equally impersonal reply. Would these small exchanges lead to real reconciliation? I did not know. But I did know that I was approaching them from a position of strength now, not the desperate need for approval that had defined my childhood. I would accept nothing less than genuine remorse and respect for my boundaries. The journey of healing is never really complete. There will always be scars, always be moments when the past reaches out to touch the present. But we can choose how we carry our wounds. We can let them define us, or we can wear them as badges of our resilience. That night behind the dumpster taught me that people who should love you can hurt you deeply. But the years since have taught me an equally important lesson: you can build a life filled with chosen family who will never leave you behind. So tell me, have you ever had to confront someone who hurt you in the past? Did you find closure or more pain? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too can survive what once seemed unsurvivable. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth is not determined by those who failed to see it. You are stronger than what happened to you.